ended up turning into more analysis than review, so I wouldn't say that it's spoilery, but I think you might actually end up getting more out of it if you've read the book already. Just a heads up. Okay, Divergent by Veronica Roth. I have a lot of complicated feelings about this one, kids. This is probably going to be my longest review ever. Oh my god, I was having such a hard time getting my thoughts together to write out the script for this review that I went out and I bought the sequel, but I am not allowing myself to read it until I have finished this video. It's just been sitting there on my bedside table, silently mocking me. This is how I motivate myself. This is the person that I am. So clearly I ended up ultimately liking it if I went out and bought the sequel, but I also thought it had some pretty serious flaws, but those flaws actually kind of make it more interesting. I don't know. I told you it was complicated, but it's fine. We're gonna get through this together. But first, plot summary. So this takes place in the city of Chicago at some unspecified point in the future. Clearly after something semi-apocalyptic has happened because society has just broken down and oh look, a dystopia! So the city has separated itself into 5 factions. There's Dauntless, who are the brave, Abnegation, who are the selfless, Candor the honest, Erudite the intelligent, and Amity the kind. And each of these factions is in charge of running different aspects of society based on what they value / are good at. So you are born into a faction, but when you're 16, you take an aptitude test, and that tells you what faction you would be the most suited for. And then there's a choosing ceremony, and you get to pick whatever faction you want to be a part of for the rest of your life. But you have to choose very carefully because you aren't guaranteed a place in the faction that you choose. You have to be initiated, and if you can't meet the initiation requirements, then you become factionless. And the factionless basically just have to live like outside of society, completely separated in their own part of the city from everyone else, doing all the jobs that nobody else wants to do, like collecting the garbage and driving the buses and that kind of thing. Okay, so our heroine Triss was born into Abnegation, but she's never really felt like she's fit in there. But she also really cares about her family and isn't sure that she could leave them. And when she takes her aptitude test, something weird happens. And the person giving her test is like, okay, you are divergent, which means that you are equally suited for more than one faction. And you can choose whatever you want, but for real, don't tell anyone about this. You would be in incredible danger if anybody knew that you were divergent. And Triss is still really conflicted about what she should do, but now she can add worry about being divergent on top of that. And then she makes her choice, and that sets off a chain of events that changes everything. Okay, let's start with what I liked. This is crazy readable. I stayed up way too late finishing this because once I got about 200 pages in, I did not want to stop. If you follow me on Goodreads, you may have seen my status update about this one that just said, "Help, I am trapped in this book," entirely in capital letters. The beginning is a little slow, which is probably because every summary of this book, even the vaguest ones, is always like, Triss is going to have to make a surprising choice, ooh. So you sort of know what the plot is working toward. Yeah, you kind of have to spoil like the first 5 chapters of this book to make anybody want to read it in the first place, but that has the unfortunate side effect of making those first 5 chapters a little boring. But once you get into the meat of the book, it zips along pretty nicely. And I really like Triss as a character, which is awesome. Triss is a risk taker, which makes her exciting to read about because she often does things that are surprising. I mean, this is ultimately a story about choice, and Triss makes a lot of really interesting choices. Okay, now we gotta get into the negatives, and it's really just the one. I mean, there are other smaller negatives too, but this one is big, and so that's what I want to focus on. And that is the fact that this world building just does not make any goddamn sense. I just do not believe that this would ever happen. I just can't believe that this system with the factions would develop organically. It is clearly such a terrible idea. Like, this is clearly a scenario where people tried to set up a utopia and failed, but their idea for a utopia was really bad. Honestly, if Veronica Roth had just written this similarly to something like The Giver, where there's really no indication either way that this is our world in the future, I probably would have been fine with it. But she didn't. This is definitely future Chicago. Also, even if I accept that this would actually happen, I can't accept how long it's apparently been going on. It's never explicitly stated how long the society's been like this, but it's clearly a very long time. Beyond living memory, at the very least. How has it not started to fall apart until the events of this book? That's just not at all sustainable. Like, let's just look at the factionless. What incentive do the factionless actually have to participate in any of this? They have no power. They have zero chance for upward mobility. There was no mention of any factionless 13-year-olds being present at the choosing ceremony, so I'm pretty sure that if you're factionless and you have children, your children will also be factionless forever and on through the generations. These people have nothing left to lose, so why do they still go into work every day? Like, they're getting paid, but it's made very clear that it's not enough to live on. The only reason that any of them are surviving is through the charity that they're receiving from abnegation. I just can't believe that the factionless would never even make an attempt to rise up. I mean, if one day every garbage collector and bus driver and everything else just didn't show up to work one day, the city would grind to a halt and there would be nothing that anyone could do about it. You can't bring in scabs to do the work because there just aren't any other people. You can't kill all of them or throw them all in jail because then you'd still be out all of your bus drivers. And like, this is an easy fix. It would have made way more sense if the punishment for not getting initiated was banishment. Which is another thing. There is absolutely no indication of what is happening outside of the city at all. It's like they live on an island. There is a giant fence around the perimeter of the city, ostensibly for protection, but I mean, this is a dystopia. Obviously, it's there to keep everybody in. And then just outside of the fence surrounding the city, Amity has their farms where they grow food for everybody. But what's beyond the farms? No one seems to know or care. You'd think they'd at least come up with some kind of story about how, oh, it's so dangerous on the outside. You can't go out. The fence, it's protecting you. It's definitely not trapping you in here. Oh yeah, there are lions out there. Very unsafe. You need to stay inside the city limits because of the lions. But like, no one is even curious about it, so I guess it doesn't matter. But here's the thing about the world building that makes me not completely hate it. If you take it as a metaphor for dealing with conformity when you're a teenager, then it works really well. Like, high school cliques aren't as strict and all-ruling as John Hughes movies would suggest, but I feel like when you're a teenager, you have this tendency to put yourself and everyone else into these little boxes, not even based on what group you're a part of, like just sort of based on what type of person that you feel like you are. And it feels like very suffocating. And as you get older, you eventually, hopefully, realize that that's really silly and people are vast and contain multitudes and you should just enjoy stuff and not worry about it so much. Like when I was in high school, I was like a weird arty type. I was really pretentious, basically. Yeah. So I just point blank refused to have anything to do with like pop music or summer blockbusters or anything like that. And now I'm just like, fuck it, One Direction dance party, let's go. Like, obviously there are some preternaturally confident teenagers who just have a very strong sense of self, and this is never really an issue for them, but it's something that most of us end up having to go through. And if you look at the factions as high school cliques, and the factionless as what it feels like will happen to you if you don't conform, and the disinterest in the outside world as how when you're in high school it feels like you will never be outside of it a lot of the time, then yeah, this totally works on that level. I have no idea if this was intentional or not, but I don't think it really matters. Because I think this is why this book is so popular. I think this is what is resonating with people, even if they don't consciously realize it. Because we experience this story through Tris, and Tris is Divergent. Tris doesn't have to stay in her box. Triss gets to break free. I told you my feelings were complicated. That review was intense. Like, it went one way and then it went the other way and just kind of circled around again. Yeah, so I'm gonna take a nap and let's talk about Divergent in the comments, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.